Good morning, everybody. This is Walk the Dog with Riot Mort, and it is not Friday. I'm actually recording this Thursday, Thursday night at about 8 o'clock, because tomorrow morning I will be at the airport and on an airplane. So you guys get a pre-recorded version. This is actually the first time out of all of these that I've done a pre-recorded version, but I figured that was better than not doing one, and there've been a lot of questions to answer in the backlog, so I figured I'd get through a bunch of them. And yeah, so by the way, for those, I know I've seen this question pop up a lot on YouTube, but for those of you on YouTube that watch this and you're wondering where I get the questions from, on my Discord, we have a thing where you can post questions, people upvote those questions, and then generally I'll either look at the upvotes, or if I just think it's an interesting question, I'll pull from there. So if you want to ask questions, hop on the Discord. And yeah, so I will say, by the way, this leadership thing is over. I'm glad it's over. It was good to see people. It was good to talk to people. Definitely not my favorite thing, kind of as I predicted. I'm ready to get back. So kind of glad it's over. But yeah, overall, some good FaceTime. That was worth it. And there were some good things. So Riot's a pretty cool company sometimes. I'm not really a Kool-Aid drinker, but you know, overall we got some cool stuff cooking. So yeah. All right, I'm just going to jump right into questions so that this will be nice and valuable for questions. All right, first off, somebody asked, hey, with the current new prismatic structure, what do you think of the idea of making the prismatics easier if you have more emblems? So my first reaction to that idea is I'm pretty against it. If you look at something like both Battle Academia and Soul Fighter, right, the emblems themselves already allow you to accelerate into the condition of hitting the maximum trait, right? Like 7 Battle Academia on 7 with the emblem means you can hit it more guaranteed, hit it quicker. 8 Soul Fighter means you don't have to hit the Gwen, which is a pretty nice condition. And on top of the fact that you just have the emblem, which is more powerful. So I'm not a big fan of that solution. They're already doing that. There's no need to double down on it. And the more you double down on that, the more it becomes like, well, in order to hit them, you really do need the extra power or extra condition that comes from the emblems. So I'm pretty against that as a solution. Now, one of the things I do think is interesting, though, is that 7 Battle Academia is a really good example here, where once you hit 7 Battle Academia, it's sort of like, okay, an extra emblem doesn't really do a whole lot for me. It's like, yeah, I can take out Katarina, maybe put in, you know, another Prodigy, or a Bastion or something like that. But like the actual power itself isn't really that insane. And I do think we have lost a little bit of the fun. Like only Star Guardian really has this right now, where it's like there's a Star Guardian 9 and a Star Guardian 10, even though the Prismatic activates at 8. Which does beg the question, separate from a Prismatic, should there be something like a Battle Academia 9 that's just a little bit more power, right? It's maybe not even like a lot of power, right? Like let's say it's tuned, you know, I always call this the milk tuning, where it's like it's tuned so that 9's never really optimal, but it's still an option for players to take it. It does have that problem of the mixed messaging of like, well, I hit 9, shouldn't this be really exciting? But but even Soul Fighter, right? Like I've seen some people hit like Soul Fighter 9, stuff like that, and it's like, I wish it did something else. I'd rather see emblems do something like that. One idea I pitched, and I'm going to tell you this because I'm pretty sure we're never going to ship it, but I thought it kind of had some legs to it, was like every emblem once you pass the max would give you a little bit of like generic stats. So like imagine every Battle Academia after 7 would give you plus 150 health for your team or something like that. And so that way if you somehow hit like 10 Battle Academia for no reason, you were still getting some benefit other than just they all have the trait. But it made the tooltips really messy and really overkill. And it was just like an extra layer of complication and confusion in an already complicated game. So I don't think we're really going to go down that route. But I do think like one of the side effects of the current prismatic system is that, yeah, emblems are just kind of less exciting, right? Like really the current exciting ones are like Star Guardian, though I say that with an asterisk because I understand that right now Star Guardians are not meta, so no one's actually building Star Guardian, so it's not exciting. But assuming, like we saw this on PvE when Star Guardian was strong, having the 9 and 10 actually made it quite strong, which was cool, even though it wasn't the prismatic. And then obviously the other one being Crystal Gambit, but this is just another example where it's like, yeah, because 7 Crystal Gambit is insane, right? Like the combat power alone you get from that is just pretty wild. And so I do think we need to go make sure that emblems are exciting and adding new things there. But I really don't think the solution is give the trait even more power or have it accelerate to the prismatic quicker. Um, and you can see the tension right now around the prismatics, right? I've definitely seen many posts a day of people going, it shouldn't be this hard to hit. It shouldn't be this hard to hit. And I see other people going, no, it's fine. I'm seeing it about what I would expect a prismatic. And so we'll have to do some deeper analysis, and I'll talk to the team that's like working on this space right now, people like Truxie and anyone else, and see how they're feeling about it. But definitely some learnings here, and we'll have to see how this impacts future sets. So yeah, that's kind of my reasoning. So there you go. All right, next one is do you take account positioning when balancing? There's been a lot of positioning things that have come up this set, right? It's like Cassante going all out, Akali positioning, and various wrapping techniques that are happening right now, Jarvan's, you name it. There's a lot of different things. And is all of this taken into account when balancing? So the answer is yes, but no. The problem here in communicating this is that when you're using the term balancing, you're sort of saying the general power of things, right? And generally, we assume that positioning is a skill test that you have to do. And when we balance, we assume optimal positioning as part of their maximum power attributes, right? Like if we assume that Akali is positioned perfectly, that should be where her maximum power is, right? Like all of our things are balanced. We always, our framework was always balance the game as if perfect computers were playing it, and it's up to people to make the adjustments necessary to get there because we're a strategy game. We're not an APM game. There aren't limitations. If you know the perfect positioning, you can achieve that sort of computer level play. So it is taken into account in that regard. But like, I think what you're asking for is like, does the team fully understand all of these optimal positionings before we release the set? No, certainly not. I'd be lying if I said we knew everything that was going on. And oftentimes, if anything, the positioning can be one of the things that our challenger players very quickly, or sometimes over time, will push things to their limit. But in that regards, right, like you still have to balance around that current positioning being part of the equation of their maximum power. Now, there's a separate part of this conversation, which is the fact that like how necessary should positioning be? And this is a much more complicated topic because I'm much more a proponent, like I understand as a designer that not all of our fights can be front to back, right? But I also think that when you have too much that isn't front to back, you end up with a kind of a situation where we're in right now, where it's like, I just want to put a Caitlyn on my board. How do I do that? Well, you kind of can't, because between, the Cassantes and the Akalis, or the Katarinas, or the Rises, or the Gwens, like there's just so much, I call it backline access, that it feels pretty helpless. And all of a sudden what you have to do is like, okay, if the set has this much backline access, then all of a sudden we expect a Caitlyn to be building an Edge of Night or a Bloodthirster or a Gunblade. But if we do that, that means their maximum power potential goes down. And so then the champion needs inherent buffs to make that possible, right? And then you end up with this weird arms race. And the person who gets left behind in the arms race, because it's like, okay, Caitlyn needs to be more survivable to survive these things. So you buff up Caitlyn, but then she's doing too much. And the thing that gets left behind is actually the tanks, right? Like a tank like Leona or Poppy, right? Like their job is to survive, or even something like a Mundo. And it's like, well, if everything just goes around them, then what purpose do they serve, right? And so, and we always talk about like player fantasies. There are definitely player fantasies of like big Cho'Gaths in your front line stacking up and being these untankable, unkillable monsters. Mundo, a little overpowered right now, in my opinion. My uninformed opinion. Remember, I'm not on the balance team here right now. But he does fulfill that fantasy really well, right? And you actually have seen, maybe not at highest elo, but like Archangel's Mundos being really, really hard to kill, or Locket Mundos creating that fantasy, and that's great. But what you don't want is like, well, he's just unkillable, but you skip him and then go kill the backline and then kill Mundo in overtime. Right? It's like you want to build tanks that get to be tanks. So I don't know. And this is, again, a personal opinion. I'm going to tell you my personal opinion, kind of like we talked about in this morning's video, or for you, yesterday's video. My personal preference is not super relevant here, but I've always felt like having 2 to 4 backline access champions that can mix it up in a set is good, but any more than that starts to get a bit chaotic. Set 14, I really liked Zed. I thought Zed was like the perfect amount of it. He didn't kill things too quickly, but he was strong, and there was some good amount of backline access in 14. 15 definitely feels like there's a lot. It's hard right now, and I think that's one of the reasons why, like, at least a week ago, I haven't checked the data recently because I've been here, but like I know Ginsu's was really struggling because a combination of the pace of combat and the ability to skip to the backline meant it was an item that just never got to reach that like pinnacle attack speed that it was meant to provide. I did really quick, like an hour ago, while I was waiting for my phone to charge, I did look at like the artifact stats, because I've seen a lot of people complaining like artifacts are very, very imbalanced. There've been some really bad takes on these. There's a couple Twitter users I've seen have some real bad takes, but to be fair, like you look at the artifact balance, because you do that thing where you look at tactics.tools, sort by top 4, and go, oh, these numbers are too high and these numbers are too low. Look at me, I'm so smart. But there are definitely a few right now that are like, oh, yeah, there's a couple artifacts that are certainly interesting. And I think one of the ones that surprised me was, sorry, I'm blanking on the name of it, but the newer one, the tank one, right, that makes you really, really tanky. Seeing that be really strong was pretty surprising. I haven't dug into it, but yeah, definitely some work to do there. I'm getting a little off topic here, but the TLDR here is that, yes, positioning has to be taken into account when balancing. We can only do so much before we launch a set. You guys do way more and help us solve that, but it must be taken into account. And so if, using Cassante as the example, the optimal play is to put him in the backline so that he has that delayed start and then wraps, well, then we have to balance him around the assumption that he's going to wrap, and that's just a thing. Or we need to change it so that that's no longer possible, and like that has to be taken into account. So yeah, there you go. All right, next question is, how do you design around luck? And the person who asked this question typed out a really long thing. I don't have it all here in front of me, but the TLDR of it was, there are clearly some things in the game that are like highly impactful luck things, right? Like someone hits a 2-star 5 cost on level 7, or silver prismatic destiny into the perfect augment, or various other like certain high roll scenarios. But there's also like much more less impactful luck things, right? Like, hey, if I've got my tank line set up in the front line and it's a 50-50 who's going to get attacked first, my Leona or my Poppy, that amount of luck can change the outcome of a fight, right? And so there's all these elements of luck within the game. How do you design around that? And this is a pretty long and complicated question, because each individual piece of luck can be important. But the general idea here is, if you think about TFT in the super abstract world, right, that throughout the entire game, there are so many random sequence of events, right? Like what appears in your shop, who you fight sometimes when the matchmaking is set up, what augments you see, what type of augments you see, what items you get, right? Like if you think of all of these as a random event, right? And the low consequence ones are pennies, and every time a shop rolls, think of it as like you flipped a coin and heads it went your way or tails it didn't, right? And an augment might be a quarter, because it's a pretty impactful event that can really change the outcome of a game. Heads it goes your way, tails it doesn't. Certain fights might, like the positioning thing we talked about with Poppy and Leona, that's probably a penny, but maybe like the items you get are dimes, right? They're not quite augment levels of impact, but like, they're still a coin flip of a dime level of quality, right? And if you lay out all of the decisions that happen in a game that are essentially these coin flips, if you will, there's probably like 2 to 300 of them, maybe more, based on the shops, if each shop is a penny. But the value of them might all add up to roughly $2 or $3, right? And the idea is that if you and I played a game where we bet $1,000 on a single coin flip, that's probably, pretty extreme. But having that many different coin flips and that many different variant situations, on average, and you like, there's probably things like this. You can look this up as a study, but it's a bell curve, right? It's like if you flipped 100 coins, how many heads and tails would you get? Most of the time, it's about 50-50. There's going to be some that are 60-40, 40-60. It'll be a barrel curve, and there will be extreme cases where it's like sometimes there was like a 20-80 or an 80-20. But like there's this whole study about randomness and how like the distribution is generally even. And so most of your games are going to be on that high end of that bell curve, where if you take the average value of all those coin flips and which ones went your way, which ones didn't, you end up with sort of like, hey, this was the unique game where my augment was a low roll, tails, but my items were a high roll, heads, and my shops were a high roll, heads, and some of my combat matchmaking was low roll, right? And you're like, it's a different situation than the other part. And the joy of TFT, or the challenge that we present to the player that adds the depth, is how you respond to which random events go your way and which ones don't. And again, one of the things when you asked about, like, how do we design around it, we try to make sure that there aren't too many things in our game that, going back to that value thing, are more than a quarter, right? So like, I don't want a $1 random event, right? That's like so impactful that if it goes your way, it can decide the entire game, right? If augments are the limit, because there are challenger players right now going, well, they got this augment, it decided the game. Or the carousel had a spatula on it. That was a big thing. Because they'll exaggerate the impact of any individual thing. But I acknowledge that they're like different. But if they actually are too impactful, we've screwed up, right? And so you don't want, like, a dumb example here is like anomalies when they first launched, right? Because it was like, well, if you knew how to make it the perfect anomaly and the anomalies weren't balanced and created certain situations, that could be like a 50 cent or $1 worth of power onto the impact of your game, and that's incorrect, right? And you want to make sure that's not what's happening. And so the way we design around luck is making sure that anything that we add that has an element of luck to it, its impact to the actual game is relatively small. And then we are okay with the game being a lot of these series of events. Now, I've talked about, my dismay for some of the other types of games in our genre, but I'll pick on Hearthstone Battlegrounds as an example here, because one of the flaws I have with that game is that because there are so few random events, not to say that each event, like all of their events are random, but there's just not that many of them. And so each one can have a massive impact, right? And so like when all of a sudden you only have 7 coin flips, if the first one doesn't go your way, it's going to feel like $1 by itself. And the impact of a single random event catastrophically deciding the outcome of your game is always going to feel terrible, right? And in like Hearthstone Battlegrounds case, it's literally like, hey, you and I are fighting each other. Who goes first? That can literally swing the entire fight, which is ludicrous, right? Like it just feels bad. It's like, well, they attacked first. That's it, Doesn't matter all the effort I put into building my team comp or anything like that. And when you feel that low of a control, it feels bad. And so, like I said, my theory and my design, like the way I design TFT, is that having so many of these events creates a thing where you have to react to that. And that's why when people are like, oh, you low rolled in this situation, you better FF. It's like, no. There are other situations coming up that I could high roll to fix this, right? It's like, yeah, my augment was bad and my items were bad, but I could still 3-star the forecast, right? Like I can still turn this around. There's always outs. And that's why that game has always felt good. And so, yeah, I mean, again, I could talk about luck theory for ages here. I don't want to bore you with that. But the TLDR is, how do we design around it? We make sure that if we're adding a luck scenario to the game, that the impact of that luck scenario is minor, and the quantity of them are fruitful enough, that the average experience is generally a pretty solid one. And so like you know, as much as the power-ups are currently flawed because of the optimization or whatever, one of the reasons we added like all those removers was essentially to give you more coin flips on your power-ups, right? Assuming all the power-ups were relatively balanced, which they're not, I know, but assuming they were, it was like, okay, you roll, oops, you flipped tails, low rolled a little bit, but you get another flip. This time you flip heads. That's enough to swing it around. And now with everybody having heads on their power-ups, it's a nice even kind of fight, making sure that works out, right? And like, with all of our various systems of like augments, making sure they give you things they need, or items being sort of relatively even distributed, is we just make sure that the extreme low roll scenarios are never too punishing. And the high roll scenarios are rare enough but fun enough that they don't decide the game. And so, yeah, that's kind of it. There you go. All right, this next question is a really interesting one. And I don't know if I'm going to do this one justice because this is such a deep question. Should online games be immortal? And this, we're talking about, should games be around for 10 years, 20 years? And then the other facet of this question that the person asked was, if online games are around for a long time, which they often are, what ends up happening is that the game becomes much more complicated and hard to get into, right? Like the first day you played WoW is very different than now trying to get into retail WoW 20 years later. That's a very different experience. So this is something that the reason I think it's a hard question or an interesting question is because I don't think the industry has figured it out yet. I don't think we know the answer to this. I think the number of games that survive longer than 5 years, 10 years is like 15 to 20, right? Like obviously you can name the big ones, right? Like Roblox and Minecraft and Fortnite, League of Legends, World of Warcraft, Hearthstone, right? Like you can definitely name a few, but there aren't that many, right? And each of like the reason I'm saying it's not that many is, hell, let's just say it's 30 or 40, which probably sounds too high, but let's just say it's 30 or 40. The sample size of what each of those have done is not enough to determine what is successful here, right? Because like what worked for Minecraft to keep it around would not necessarily work for League of Legends to keep it around, right? The audience needs are different. And then each one has their own different problems, right? Whereas like Minecraft, for example, I think is probably pretty good at retaining new kids as they come in, much like a Mario Kart or a Pokemon. Whereas like League, I would assume the theory is like, well, getting 12-year-olds to play League of Legends is hard because it just doesn't interest them quite as much because PC games for young kids is on the decline or something like that. Or World of Warcraft was like, how do you get a new person to play World of Warcraft when the barrier to entry is so high, right? And like each of these games has their own different problem to overcome. So coming up with a generic sort of answer of like, should all games experience it in this way is really, really tough. And before, the last 20 years, the first 20 years of the gaming industry, the answer was no, right? Like games were a thing that you consumed. You bought a game, played it, beat it, and it was done. That's how video games work. They were like movies, right? Like there's no forever TV show. I mean, Simpsons jokes aside, like the idea that we create something that gets consumed forever is like a brand new concept to this industry. And I don't think this industry truly understands the ramifications of it or the long-term impacts on the business, right? Like if you go on LinkedIn and look up all these like game devs, and I use air quotes here, that are like experts on the industry and like talking about it, one of the common things I see being talked about right now is that like 90 to 95% of game hours right now are on games that are 5 years or older, right? Like there has not been a major success game, like S-tier level success that has come out in the last 5 years, right? People are still playing Fortnite and Roblox and Minecraft and League and World of Warcraft, right? Like these are all old games. There are not a lot of new success cases. And so people trying to crack into that market are failing miserably. And what does that mean, right? It's like the like extremely pessimistic version of this is like, well, we don't need game devs to make new games anymore because the 25 forever games are there And if you want to go work on them, you better learn how to make World of Warcraft raids or Fortnite events or whatever, because that's all that's really needed anymore. Which, again, that's not actually true. I'm just saying that's like the most pessimistic version of it, right? Um, and so it's something the industry is trying to figure out. Now, my, you ask my opinion here. My opinion, and sorry, Riot, if you disagree here, but my opinion is no. Um, I actually think no matter what you do, you can't make a game be a forever game, because one of the things that makes a game interesting is it's a new experience. And this is something I'm going through a lot right now, where it's like, I don't want to play another platformer because it's like I know how platformers work, unless that platformer has a really cool, unique twist, right? It's why I can't play Pokemon games anymore, because it's like I know how Pokemon works. I've done this before. It's nice to play a new Pokemon like once every 10 years, but I can't play every Pokemon because it's like, this is not for me, right? Um, and that's why when like working on TFT, all I can do is apply this to TFT. And for me, the way TFT succeeds is by each set offering some sort of new surprise or new twist, something really interesting. And really, that's not like a revolutionary thing, right? Like every Mario Kart added a new twist. Every Pokemon is supposed to add a new twist and things like that. It's just how impactful are those, right? Like for me, Pokemon was like, okay, they're just different Pokemon, but otherwise it's kind of the same thing. Whereas at least Mario Kart was like, oh, Double Dash, that's a neat twist. I'll check out what happens when you have two carts. That's cool. Or Smash Brothers is like, oh, they've changed some of the rules of things. This is great, you know. Um, but like, or even World of Warcraft for a while there, it was like, oh, new professions and whatever. The problem with World of Warcraft was it just became like the things they added just felt like a new lever to fill, a new bar to fill, a new system to interact with, and they all started feeling similar. So I don't know, because again, to me at least, the game dev industry needs innovation, and that innovation is going to come from somewhere, right? In Roblox case, it's through user-generated content. In Minecraft's case, it's pretty similar, but also some new content. Whereas TFT and like Fortnite are just like lots of content, right? We're essentially a content treadmill of new things to do. Now, the other thing you brought up here is like games get harder to get into, and this is where I think like World of Warcraft struggles, but like they've solved this with like World of Warcraft Classic. I think League, you've seen with League, they've always got this problem right now of like the 170 champions or whatever, but they've tried to like simplify the item system or change some of the core game rules, but they're always going to have that champion problem unless they come up with something clever. For TFT, I think you've heard me talk about the complexity ceiling. We know we can't cross that threshold for the exact reason you're describing. You can't be a forever game if you like. Let's say you haven't played TFT for a while and you come back for set 16 and you're like, what is all this new stuff? I don't get it. And I'm supposed to keep track of this other system and these anomalies and this thing. And like, oh my God, right? Like that's why stuff has to be pulled out. Otherwise, it won't be a forever game. The other thing is like power creep. It's funny. TFT doesn't have a power creep problem, but I think if you look at like a game like Hearthstone, for example, it's like a lot of people when they first played Hearthstone was like, oh, on turn 4, casting a Yeti was like a pretty good turn if you could like innervate coin, get a Yeti out pretty soon. And now you like see some turn 3s where people have like 2 16/16s and you're like, what? This is not the game I remember, right? And like that's what we need TFT to stay, is TFT needs to be the game that like you take the 2-year break and you come back and it's still that same game with a twist, not that same game with layers upon layers upon layers of complexity. So I think for a game to truly be a forever game, if it's going to take a stab at this, can't be adding those layers of complexity. And that's where I do think TFT with its set model does have a chance to be a forever game, because we can always continue to shrink and pull, right? A lot of other games, it's like if I take something away, right? I think we've seen this with World of Warcraft, right? When World of Warcraft tries, they know they need to pull out systems, but if you pull out systems, like I'll be honest with you, one of the ones, even I had this reaction as a player one time when I came back. I had at least one of my characters was really high in inscription, and when I came back, that profession basically did nothing, right? Because they had gotten rid of glyphs, and so it was like, well, now what does this do? And it's like, because they knew the glyph system was a bit too much, they tried to pull it out, and Now people have a dead profession. You create a sense of loss, and players are like, well, I don't want to play this anymore, right? Whereas TFT, we've at least trained our audience that like stuff goes away, and that's a good thing, you know. And so that's where I think that helps us be a forever game. So all the way to TLDR, to your original question, is do I personally think games should be forever games? No. But are there going to be? Yes. The industry certainly seems to be trending that way. And do I think it's an issue that those forever games are too complicated to get into? Yes. It's called an aging audience. There's a lot of games that are going through that right now. The good news is I think TFT actually can avoid this problem to some extent. And it is definitely a problem that the teams have to think about, right? Imagine if you're a designer on World of Warcraft right now and you're like, how do we get new players into retail? What do we do? Right? Like that's probably their number one problem right now that they're thinking about every day. So yeah, it's a tricky one, but it's definitely one of the biggest shifts in the industry, especially in the last 5 years, because again, try to really look and like what are the big successful games. And I know there's probably someone out there who's like, no, single player games are great, right? Like Elden Ring made a lot of money. And it's true, but I've talked about this before, right? Elden Ring made $1 billion. Genshin Impact makes $2 billion every year in perpetuity. You know? So there's levels of success here. And like Roblox is like off the charts right now. You know, and so it's like any company that wants to invest in making a single player game is looking at Roblox going, how do I get a piece of that pie? So, yeah. All right, there you go. Hopefully, you guys have a great Friday. As you can see, it's starting to get dark out. So this will be up at like 7 a.m. tomorrow. Hopefully, you guys enjoy. Stream this weekend. It'll be interesting streaming this weekend because I have not had the chance to play TFT literally since Sunday. Sunday was my rough stream. I guess I played 2 more games that Sunday off stream, but like with this trip, I just haven't played any TFT. So like I know the meta's been shifting a bunch. So the current plan right now is I think Saturday ranked and then Sunday maybe PBE. There is a lot of PBE changes. There's no patch rundown. So you know you're just gonna have to wait for the official patch notes. That's part of the change here, I guess. So that'll be fun though. And then Monday I'll have an announcement, a small one. It's nothing crazy. And then that'll be it. So, yeah, cool. All right. Hopefully you have a good day. Can't wait to see you on stream. Make sure you show up and say hi. This is where I'm supposed to say something like, don't forget to like and subscribe. But you know what? Don't actually do whatever you want. You do you. You have a great weekend and you do you. So, yeah. All right. That's going to do it for me. Until next time, take it easy.